Hey, we're back. We're back with more Live from the Heartland, brought to you every Saturday morning on WLUW 88.7, and you can get it anywhere in the world at WLUW.org. We put it up on YouTube.com/HeartlandMedia, and we show some of them on CAN TV. And we just had a nice talk with Bill Ayers. We talked about a lot of things, including race. One of the people that I've gotten to know in the last couple of years is a fellow named Jakobi Williams. And he first contacted me to talk about the old days, talk about the Rainbow Coalition, Black Panther Party, the Young Lords, the Young Patriots rising up angry. And you were teaching down at University of Kentucky. On the side, you told me how sometimes difficult it was being a black sociology professor, being used by the administration to cool out stuff that was going on campus. Now you're at the University of Indiana in Bloomington. Yeah, congratulations.
Congratulations.
And your book is out. Your book, From the Bullet to the Ballot. And it's about the Black Panther Party pretty much in Illinois, I believe.
And the Rainbow Coalition.
And the Rainbow Coalition.
If we had a couch, we would have put you and Mr. Ayers together on the couch, because, you know, this is one and the same.
Side by side.
Side by side. Exactly. But in any case, welcome back, like Michael said, and what a week, right?
Yeah.
What a week. We, as ever, December 4th will never be anything for most of us but the murder of Fred Hampton by Chicago police and
talk about
attorney.
Fred Hampton, because you were a young guy growing up in Chicago, and clearly either you heard about it or you were influenced by it. You decided to write a book about it.
Greatly influenced by Chairman Fred Hampton. So again, growing up Inglewood, Southside Chicago, the two martyrs that were ingrained in us from a very early beginning were Emmett Till and Fred Hampton. These folks who were killed during the movement, trying to create freedom and change for not just African Americans, but people of color in general. And when I was a graduate student at UCLA, I had the privilege of examining the archive of the Black Panther Party, the Huey P. Newton Incorporated archive, and UCLA and Stanford were in the process of trying to decide who was going to buy it as this bidding war. So Stanford ended up getting it, but after going through those files and realizing how many books have been written on the party, like none have been written on Fred Hampton and none on the Illinois chapter, realizing there were 49 chapters of this party. So then my first book was on Nat Turner and slave revolt. So I diverted from 19th century to 20th century as a historian, and I began to do this investigation. So it began as a biography of Fred Hampton, and then it evolved into this study of the Illinois chapter, then it evolved into this, the evolution of the Rainbow Coalition, and it's steadily evolving as I look at the racial coalition in Chicago politics as an opposition to traditional machine politics and the ways in which these nameless, faceless people and groups like Rising Up Angry and the Young Patriots and the Young Lords and the Panthers and
the Women's Union
and Joint Community Union and all these groups, these nameless faces folks who are not even in footnotes in history in most major university textbooks. So I felt that this was more of a not a niche, but an area of history that hasn't been exposed to the public in a glowing way in which I believe it should be.
You shined the light on it.
I hope I have.
Yeah, nice going. Do you find that students that you track with right now are interested in this, know about it, are hungry for it, are too busy doing their own version of the movement right now?
All of the above. All of the above. So what happens is all the above except the know about it aspect. Most students don't know about who these nameless faceless people and organizations are.
Right.
Know about the big icons. You know Fred Hampton, but they don't know Chuck Geary or Mike James or Jose Chacha Jimenez, right? So it's my duty to make sure they understand the coming together of this movement and the struggle that transcends race, that bring these folks together on these common causes, the idealism of that kind of identity politics. And so they are both empowered by it, but at the same time discouraged. Like, well, what happened to the movement? This was so wonderful. This is so great. Where is it now? And after instilling them over and over again, that it's the youth who have to continue the struggle. It's the youth who have to continue the movement. That's us old timers, and I consider myself an old timer. Here I am sitting up here with you all.
Police.
Right.
Duh.
At 37, right? But compared to them, I'm an old timer. So
just watch your mouth, Mr. Williams. Don't ever do that again.
So they're using this as motivation. And so one very important part that I usually point out to students is the aspect of COINTELPRO and the Red Squad, and that they now have this information at their disposal that you all and activists in that period did not know was actually happening in the ways in which the repression and oppression was taking place by law enforcement.
Tell people what COINTELPRO was and tell what the Red Squad was here in town.
Okay, COINTELPRO is a secret intelligence operation led by the FBI. It's an acronym for the Counterintelligence Program, and what they did was use various illegal methods to disrupt, discredit, assassinate, or use their word, I should say, neutralize certain individuals, organizations, and the movement. All illegal, by the way, violating not only constitutional rights, but civil rights, particularly First Amendment rights. And then the Red Squad, almost every major city had a Red Squad. It came out of House Un-American Activities Committee during the McCarthy era. And so almost every major city police department had this Red Squad, and its goal was supposedly to divert communism. But what happened is, at least what I write about in chapter 5 of this book, is the way in which Mayor Daley uses the Red Squad as his version of COINTELPRO. So any group that had any dissent against this administration was targeted, and I point out who some of these so-called subversive are. They have to be like the Jewish Women League of Voters, the Boy Scouts of America. So any of these groups, these are the subversive groups according to the Red Squad, because they had certain forms of dissent against the administration. So if he's talking to those groups, you can imagine what's in those Red Squad files about certain individuals such as yourself.
Did you ever find my file? I've never seen it. But
you have, I actually have a couple of photos I haven't showed you that I've appropriated, liberated from those files. But yes, you have at least 2 boxes, and Rise of Randy has about 4. But I've yet to get through all those files yet.
And guess what? They haven't stopped. We got a letter from a police
we had a meeting
outfit that was reporting on a meeting here by the Occupy Rogers Park
in the era of Obama
groups. Who they were covering the meetings of Occupy Rogers Park here at Heartland Cafe. So that was a year ago. So they're keeping busy.
Of course. And the reason I point the Red Squad out is because these files were sealed by a court order in 1983, and so very few people have had access to them. You actually can't disclose what's actually in the files. You can't actually inform people what's there. And idiot me wrote an entire book on it. So if I lose my freedom, please.
Well, things do change. Things do change, and I remember Maury Daley was a Red Squad cop who chased us all around, and years later he called the Heartland and said, he asked if I was here, and someone said no, and he said, well, tell him Che Guevara's nephew called. And then he showed up. He was working in this district, then he became a commander before he passed away, and I actually sat in the truck with the former Red Squad guys on a dope stakeout as I was riding my bike by their vehicle and said hello to him. And one of the things I learned from another Red Squad cop who used to run in the Heartland Athletes United for Peace races was that there was a real difference between the Irish guys and the Eastern European guys. The Eastern European guys were much more vehemently anti-communist. That's just a little side note, so can you do that sound effect again, Katie?
Okay. Twilight Zone.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, that's
all right,
it.
We're here talking with Jakobi Williams. We're talking about his book, From the Bullet to the Ballot. What do you think about From the Bullet to the Ballot? The Panthers clearly, just the threat of armed resistance was a strength for the Panthers in a lot of ways. It probably also led to the downfall, the incarceration, the murder, assassination of a number of them. Where is it at now? We know Bobby Rush, who was the Minister of Defense, had read plenty of Mao in his day. He ended up being a congressman. He defended his position against Barack Obama, but Obama tried to capture it. And Bobby has done some good things, but he has not been the most dynamic, progressive congressman. What's your take on the Black Panther Party taking from the ballot to the bullet? What's it like? I'm from the bullet to the ballot. What's the ballot like?
I understand. So again, in this book, I don't go that far up. I pretty much end with Obama's election in 2004. 2008. What I argue in chapter 6 of the book is that his election is the legacy of the kind of work and activism these organizations were doing. This original Rainbow Coalition. So I use he as an example, President Obama example. He, David Axelrod, and Jesse Jackson as folks who appropriated aspects of this original Rainbow Coalition's ideas, strategies, tactics, rhetoric, policies, and so forth as effective tools for winning elections, but they're not actually married to the politics. So the original title of the book was actually from Fred Hampton to Barack Obama, but I have this fight. I have 3 legal battles. I saved that as a sidebar, but one of them was over this title. So I ended up changing the title to appease the publishers.
It's actually a good title.
North Carolina Press.
University of North Carolina Press, academic press. And so it's a play on Malcolm X's The Ballot of the Bullet. So I reversed it, the bullet being Fred Hampton, the ballot being Barack Obama. And pretty much what I argue in here is that there's a direct line, a continuous trajectory from Fred Hampton to Harold Washington to Jesse Jackson, David Axelrod, and Obama as to this original Rainbow Coalition. I highlight this, and I actually document this connection in chapter 6 of the book. However, I make a very important distinction that the only politician actually married to the ideas of the Rainbow Coalition was Harold Washington.
Thank you.
And everyone else, because of his successful campaign, and, for instance, when he was elected mayor, he created what he called his Rainbow Cabinet, and he put some of these members from those organizations in his cabinet. They worked on his campaign, organized his campaign, and then Jesse Jackson appropriated the title. Barack Obama moved to Chicago, becomes a political organizer. David Axelrod becomes a consultant. So these folks began to appropriate these ideal aspects of this movement for their own personal political gain. So what the Panthers, or I should say what this original Rainbow Coalition's objectives were, is not what we have in place today. Now, if you look at the campaigns of many of these individuals, you see those parallels, you see those mirror images. So for what I like to argue is Obama, the campaigner, is different from Obama, the elected official, at least as he's been president so far. That's an easy distinction to make at this period. To demonstrate that, you use these kind of ideal, right, even some of the slogans, the rhetoric, the organizing principles and strategies, then once you're elected, it's something totally different. And so to bring that to current context with Bobby Rush, it's a catch-22. I haven't examined his administration or his policies and his career in as much detail as I have these other individuals I've mentioned in the book. But as a personal sidebar, and I'm a close ally or friend, let me put that out there, of Congressman Bobby Rush. I believe that now he, and well, I don't want to say his personal business, I just say he's been dealing with some real health issues. I won't say what they were to keep his confidence, but because of that, I don't think he's taken that stance in the way in which this organization, and he as a founding member of this organization, was of taking a principled stance and being a critical thinker. He seems to just go along to get along at this point, and whatever the popular consensus in the Congressional Black Caucus or whatever so-called progressive leftist organization is, that's what he does. Probably they're not taking a leadership position is what I would hope people
probably
do.
Going forward, and we look back on history, we will still see that the Congressional Black Caucus raises a lot more important issues and has a better role than a lot of other congressional types. And they certainly, if you talk about Nelson Mandela, the Black Congressional Caucus pushed the whole issue about the economic boycott of South Africa. They played a crucial role. You mentioned Harold Washington, and we, it's almost the anniversary of when Harold passed away. It was around Thanksgiving in November.
It was already.
And it was, but he did, take off of what community organizations and political organizations did around town and sort of took it to another level. And I think without Harold Washington, there would have been a Barack Obama. Your thoughts on Harold?
Well, again, I give Harold Washington a lot of praise in the book. As one of these folks who taken this Rainbow Coalition, this organization, and these individual groups, and in some ways individual community organizers who was on the fringes of politics and not in the political arena, and he and others were able to pull these organizers into Chicago politics, into the political arena. As many of these folks, again, organized and ran this campaign, like Jose Chacha Jimenez and others, not to give you a whole list of names of who these folks are, and then he creates what he calls his Rainbow Cabinet, right? It's trying to be consistent with some of these tactics. And the influences, like for instance, some of the dynamics of the original Rainbow Coalition was all about neighborhoods first, that we're coming together as a coalition, but we're not here to control your community. We're going to give you some aspects that we believe could empower you, then we step back and help you. So ironically, segregation, Chicago is the most racially, residentially segregated city in America, and it actually gets worse with every census record. But ironically, segregation helps the coalition, and it's all about neighborhoods first, and that was Harold Washington's campaign slogan, if you recall. I think you have some posters and buttons in your vast archive with some of those things that actually says neighborhoods first.
That's
and
right.
It comes out of the organizer principle of this coalition. So when he's elected, his main trajectory is to make sure that those neighborhoods have an ear to City Hall, where they actually have representatives that adhere to their particular issues and problems.
Between both you and Bill, the conversation that I had as a teacher with my students for many, many years was, do we work within the system or without?
Or against the system.
To change the system. And of course, my response is always both. And also the question as to whether or not you can even exist outside of the system is something that we can blow a lot of time on. Speaking of time, we got 1 minute left. What are you doing in town today besides this show?
Actually, at 2 p.m., I'll be on campus, University of Chicago. There's a panel on the legacy of the Illinois Chapter of the Black Panther Party. Supposedly, Congressman Rush will be on that panel, along with Lynn French and a couple other former members of the Black Panther Party. And I'm there to talk about this legacy, this connection from the Rainbow Coalition to Obama, to highlight that the Panthers were more than just this national political militant organization, that there are some remnants, that their goal is not to put a black man.
Jakobi Williams, we got to say thank you, and hopefully you brought an extra book or two in case somebody wants one.
Thanks everybody who makes this show possible. We encourage you to do good in the world. The world needs all the good that you do. All power to the people. Live from the Heartland, over and out.
Great, appreciate it.
We ran out of time.
You're listening to 88.7 WLUW, Chicago Sound Alliance, broadcasting from the campus of Loyola University.
Travel.
Chicago. Can't repeat the past. No.
He's all right. He's had some